Friends, I want you to subscribe to my channel. It's important to me. Unveiled Truths. Jake and Laura had been together since their college days. They were the couple everyone admired, the ones who seemed destined to be together forever. Jake was smitten from the moment he saw her in their freshman literature class. Laura had a vivacious spirit, always the life of the party, and her flirtatious nature was something Jake both adored and quietly resented. Back in college, Jake noticed how Laura would casually flirt with other guys. It bothered him, especially when he heard she'd given her number to someone at a party. But love makes one overlook flaws, and he believed that once they were married, things would change. And for a while they did. After graduation, they both landed decent jobs and moved into a charming apartment in the city. Weekends were spent exploring new restaurants, planning future vacations, and dreaming about starting a family. The flirtatious episodes seemed to fade, and Jake felt more secure than ever. One evening, they attended a mutual friend's housewarming party. The place was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the aroma of homemade pizza. Jake was catching up with an old college buddy when he noticed Laura across the room, engaged in animated conversation with a tall, well-dressed man he didn't recognize. "Who's that with Laura?" Jake asked his friend Mike. Mike glanced over. "Oh, that's Daniel. He just moved here. Works in finance, I think." Jake watched as Laura laughed at something Daniel said, lightly touching his arm. A familiar knot formed in his stomach. "Excuse me," Jake muttered, making his way through the crowd. "Hey, honey," he said, slipping his arm around Laura's waist. "Introduce me to your friend." Laura looked momentarily startled but quickly regained her composure. "Jake, this is Daniel. We were just talking about the art exhibit downtown." Daniel extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jake. Laura was telling me you're quite the photographer." Jake shook his hand firmly. "I dabble. What brings you to the city?" As Daniel launched into the story about a recent job transfer, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. Laura seemed overly engaged, her eyes sparkling in a way that Jake hadn't seen in a while. Over the next few weeks, Laura mentioned Daniel casually. "Daniel said there's a great new sushi place we should try. Daniel's organizing a group hike this weekend. Want to join?" Each time, Jake felt a twinge of unease. One Saturday morning, Jake received devastating news. His cousin Mark had passed away unexpectedly. "I'm so sorry," Laura said, hugging him tightly. "Do you want me to come with you to the funeral?" He considered it but shook his head. "No, it's okay. My family can be overwhelming. I'll be back in a few days." She nodded. "Whatever you need." Jake traveled to his hometown, the funeral a blur of tears and condolences. Amidst the grief, he couldn't shake the nagging worry about leaving Laura alone. After the service, he received a text from his friend Mike. "Hey man, heard you're out of town. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Jake replied. "Family emergency? Why?" There was a long pause before Mike responded. "I wasn't going to say anything, but I saw Laura downtown with Daniel last night. They looked cozy." Jake's heart sank. Define cozy. Having dinner alone, laughing, she was holding his hand across the table. Anger and disbelief washed over him. "Thanks for letting me know." "Sorry, Jake. Thought you should hear it from a friend." Jake spent the rest of the trip in a haze, torn between confronting Laura immediately and waiting until he could see her face to face. He decided to wait, using the time to gather his thoughts. Upon returning home, he found Laura in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. "Hey, welcome back," she said cheerfully, pecking him on the cheek. "How was everything?" "About as good as a funeral can be," he replied, studying her expression. "I'm glad you're home. I missed you," she said, turning back to chop vegetables. "Did you?" he asked, his tone sharper than he intended. She glanced over her shoulder. "Of course. What's wrong?" He took a deep breath. "I heard you were out with Daniel while I was gone." She froze for a moment before resuming her chopping. "Oh, that? We just grabbed dinner. I didn't want to be alone, and you were away. Just dinner?" Mike said you were holding his hand. She set down the knife and turned to face him. "Are you spying on me now?" "Don't deflect, Laura. What's going on between you two?" "Nothing. We're just friends." Friends who hold hands over candlelit dinners. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. I can't believe you're jealous over something so innocent. Innocent? This feels all too familiar. You haven't changed, have you? Her eyes flashed. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Insecure or perceptive? You've been spending an awful lot of time with him. Because he listens to me. He's interested in what I have to say, unlike you. Jake felt a surge of anger. So that's it. You seek out attention from other men because I'm not entertaining enough for you. Don't twist my words, she retorted. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have to find companionship elsewhere. He stared at her, a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I thought we were happy. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I don't know, Jake. Maybe we've just grown apart. He took a step back. Do you want to be with him? She didn't meet his gaze. I don't know. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I think you do know, Jake said quietly. And I think you've known for a while. She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm sorry. Are you sorry for what you've done or sorry that you've been caught? Jake, please. He shook his head. I need some air. He grabbed his jacket and left the apartment, his mind racing. He wandered the streets for hours, replaying their conversation, their relationship, their entire history. Over the next few days, they barely spoke. Laura slept in the guest room, and the space between them grew into an insurmountable chasm. One evening, Jake decided he needed answers. He called Daniel. Hello, Daniel answered cautiously. It's Jake. We need to talk. There was a pause. Jake, I don't think that's a good idea. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th in an hour, please. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. At the cafe, they sat across from each other, an awkward tension hanging in the air. I'll get straight to the point, Jake began. What's going on between you and my wife? Daniel sighed. Look, man, I didn't intend for this to happen. But it did. I deserve the truth. Daniel nodded. You're right. Laura and we developed feelings for each other. It started innocently, but it grew into something more. Did you sleep with her? Daniel hesitated before nodding. Yes. Jake clenched his fists under the table. When? A few weeks ago. So while I was away at a funeral, you were sleeping with my wife. Daniel looked down. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Jake said coldly. I trusted you. I trusted her. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. They sat in silence before Jake stood up. Stay away from us. From her. Whatever happens next is between me and Laura. Back at the apartment, Jake found Laura sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I talked to Daniel, he said. She turned to face him, eyes red from crying. I figured you would. I want a divorce. She nodded slowly. I understand. That's it. No fight? No apology? What do you want me to say, Jake? That I'll change? That I'll stop? You wouldn't believe me. Can you blame me? She looked away. No. They sat in heavy silence. I loved you, he said softly. I wanted to build a life with you. I loved you too, she whispered, but somewhere along the way, we lost each other. Or maybe I lost you to your need for attention. She didn't respond. The divorce was swift but painful. Friends chose sides, and the once vibrant social circle they shared fractured. Jake moved out, finding a small apartment across town. Months passed. One day, while grabbing coffee near his new place, he bumped into Mike. Jake, long time no see. Hey, Mike. How've you been? Getting by. They sat down to catch up. Did you hear about Laura? Mike asked cautiously. Jake stiffened. No, what about her? She and Daniel broke up. Apparently, he was seeing someone else on the side. Jake sighed. Figures. How about you? Seeing anyone? He shrugged. Not really. Just focusing on myself. Well, there's someone I'd like you to meet if you're up for it. Jake considered it. Maybe. Not making any promises. Fair enough. A week later, Jake found himself at a small art gallery where Mike introduced him to Hannah, a curator with a warm smile and an easy laugh. As the evening progressed, Jake felt something he hadn't in a long time, hope. They talked for hours about art, travel, and life's unpredictabilities. At the end of the night, Hannah smiled. I'm glad Mike introduced us. Me too, Jake admitted. As they parted ways, he realized that while his past with Laura was a chapter filled with pain and betrayal, it didn't have to define his future. Epilogue. Months turned into a year. Jake and Hannah grew closer, building a relationship founded on trust and mutual respect. One afternoon, while walking through the park, they ran into Laura. Jake, she said, surprised. Hello, Laura. She glanced between him and Hannah. I see you're doing well. I am, he replied. She nodded. I'm happy for you. Thank you. As they walked away, Hannah squeezed his hand. You okay? He smiled. Yeah, I think I finally am. Reader comments. Sarajah. Wow, this story was a roller coaster of emotions. I'm glad Jay found happiness in the end. Mike 88. Laura never deserved Jake. Flirting is one thing, but cheating is unforgivable. Linnick. I appreciate how the story shows Jake's growth. Sometimes the hardest experiences lead us to better places. Tom. That confrontation with Daniel was intense. Jake handled it better than I would have. And Ma. I wish Laura had taken responsibility earlier. It's sad to see relationships fall apart due to lack of communication. Alexby. Great storytelling. Kept me hooked till the end. Ninus. I'm rooting for Jake and Hannah. They seem perfect for each other.